Hi, this is Dr. Jane Pendleton with my husband Dr. John Pendleton, and we are back with Maranatha Minutes, Genesis chapter 41. That's Genesis chapter 41. John's going to be Joseph and I'm going to narrate. So come on, open your Bibles and let's get started. Okay, well we know that Joseph's in prison, and now he's interpreted the cupbearer and the baker's dream. And it happened, it came true. The cupbearer was reinstated into the king of Egypt's as his cupbearer, and the baker was hung by a tree. But the cupbearer did not mention Joseph to the king like he had promised, for accurately telling him what his dream was. So we're going to go from there now. So Genesis chapter 41, Pharaoh's dream. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, very skinny, scrawny looking, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank, the healthy ones. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by an east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads of grain. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had just been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream that same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dreams, and things turned out exactly as he had interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled." So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. So 2 years later, he remembered his promise. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it."
"I cannot do it,"
Joseph replied to Pharaoh.
"but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires."
Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile when our river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and thin, very lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads of grain. I told this to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me." Then Joseph said to Pharaoh,
"The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has told Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance of the land of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows will be so severe.
It would be so great.
The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God.
He wanted to make sure that he knew it was coming.
And God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land and take a fifth of the harvest during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store them up, the grain, under the authority of Pharaoh, to keep in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so the country may not be ruined by the famine.
The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is in good spirit of God?" The Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you." Meaning God entrusted you, there must be a reason, and I should too. "You shall be in charge of my palace, and all of my people are to submit to your orders." To prepare for the famine. "Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So now Joseph is in charge of Egypt now. He's always in a leadership position, so God really keeps blessing him, doesn't he? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring, his family ring, from his finger and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He was showing that he was of authority from the Pharaoh now. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. And people shouted before him, "Make way! Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. He had nothing but respect from the land of Egypt now. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah and gave him Asnaeus' daughter as Potiphar, the priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. He was 30 years old. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentiful. Joseph collected all the food produced in the 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. He prepared each city and all the nations around him for this. He prepared them.
Yeah.
And people would have came for grain as well. The people from the outlying cities and the outlying villages and their own little communities, they would have heard about this. The word of mouth that travels in the caravans and things, and they would have came and prepared as well. He was to save many lives. God prepared.
And there's probably some detractors that said, "Why are they doing this crazy thing?"
And that's right. And those who weren't prepared didn't have trust in God, and He put him forth and foremost in front of even his own throne. Other than the throne, the bloodline for him had to stay intact. He let Joseph basically rule in his stay, basically. Because he had the word that he did not get interpreting his dream. So in each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain. Like the sand of the sea, it was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asnaeus' daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, and said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Means in the land where I was a slave, he made me fruitful. So he named his second son after that memory. Hebrews do that. They name things after the memories of things. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. It means now they're starting to run out of food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you to do." Yep, he knew God had a plan. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all of the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. For the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe everywhere. Well, now that's going to make Egypt rich, isn't it? It's like having a country with oil, and everybody needs oil, but nobody's got it but one country. So you're going to export all your, all the little extras that your country itself doesn't need. So all the suffering they went with eating a little bit less and putting more aside, now they're all going to reap the benefits. Their country will. So the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was so severe everywhere. And that's it for Genesis chapter 41. But isn't this exciting? God's made good out of the bad. He's given dreams and visions. So stay tuned. Be sure and hit the subscribe button, because next is Maranatha Minutes, chapter 42. We're getting through Genesis here, and we're thanking you for coming along for the ride. We hope you're joining us. We hope you're enjoying this, and I know we are. And we enjoy having you. We're keeping you in our prayers. Those of you who are writing in, be sure and keep writing in and keep asking the questions. We're hoping we're getting to your questions as well. We also have, we have our gardening videos, our canning videos. We have our construction videos. We're busy bees. I want to thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Jane Pendleton with my husband, Dr. John Pendleton with the Holy Christian Church. Blessings.